to the cloud. All right, what's up, everyone? Today's a special edition of Agency Launch, and I'm joined with my friend John Powell, who is an agency owner for farmers down in Texas. What's up, John?
What's up, Matt?
How you doing, buddy?
I'm fantastic. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for coming on with me. We've known each other for a while. We've run into each other. It's different locations. I really like your energy. I know what you're doing down there, and I'm gonna pick your brain, and I want to know, what you're doing and how you're doing it. We're in a really tough cycle right now, and anybody that's doing well, I think it's worth sharing how that's happening. So for starters, tell me how long you've been an agent, where are you at, and how did you get into this industry? Why insurance? So
Yeah, great question. Been here just about 3.5 years with farmers as an agency owner. I think my go live date was March 3 years ago. So going on that 3.5 year mark. We're in Plano, Texas, so we're in the suburbs of Dallas.
okay.
So that kind of puts us smack dab in Weatherville for a lot of the folks that know what's going on across the nation, especially as wind and hail is becoming such a primary topic for insurers. And, I think I am an incidental agency owner. So I spent 20 some odd years in
You're an
banking.
accidental agency owner?
Very accidental, right? Yeah. We spent 20 years in the banking industry, intertwined with the reserve components, spent some time in Iraq, spent some time recruiting, and finished grad school. The government was nice enough to pay for that. And my wife looked at me and she goes, "You need to do something else. You're really unhappy." And my response was, "I've got two kids, two cars, a house. I'm supposed to be unhappy. That's the American dream, right? Like
No.
if you stay unhappy long enough, someday you get to retire." And that
Right.
is genuinely like my mentality is if you just can endure and stay unhappy long enough, someday they let you retire or you die of a heart attack, one or the other.
Right.
And she's like, "That's not good enough." And so I actually went into retirement planning. So it was insurance or retirement planning. Um, at the time, Farmers was closed. I looked at State Farm. I didn't like that. I felt very much like an employee there based on just our conversations. They offered me a contract and I ended up turning it down. And they said, "Yeah, we don't think you're going to be happy here." And did retirement planning. Ended up getting recruited by a district, becoming the assistant district manager of a district here in Plano. And one of our agents got really, really sick. And I knew him from years of networking before coming, like I knew him personally, right? And
Yeah.
so I was like, "Man, how are you going to survive?" And he goes, "I'm not." I was like, "Well, would it help if we bought your agency?" And he goes, "Dude, it'd be an extra prayer." So I talked to the DM and I talked to my wife, and she's like, "Yeah, I hate the fact that you went out to be a business owner and then went back to work for somebody. Go back out." And so we purchased this agency and we've been trying to run ever since.
Yeah, that's a path. So were you were you looking for an opportunity? Were you happy as an assistant district manager and just kind of, what what drove you to purchase the agency? You weren't just doing this guy a favor. Obviously, it was something inside of you that you wanted to do. So like, what was what triggered that decision?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I think um, I was looking for something. The advisor route never fit. I love investing. I absolutely love markets. I love all that stuff. But there were so many handcuffs due to FINRA and the firm that I was with that I just couldn't be me.
Yeah.
Where the thing I love about farmers is our contract design
Hmm.
and the autonomy that it affords us. And so I could, add my flavor to the very boring industry of insurance. I had a guy call me for a quote the other day and I go, "Man, what's leading you to go through the root canal of the financial services industry, shop for insurance?" Started laughing. He goes, "Well, like I just got my renewal notice." I'm like, "Great, let's talk about that." So
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to know, like, it's kind of when I do presentations to realtors, I say, "Hey, my name is John Powell, principal agent of the Powell industry. Don't stop listening. I know I'm in the top three, right?" It's like dentist, proctologist, insurance agent. Like we're the worst to deal with, but we're important, right? Because we
Yeah.
help you get your stuff back. And I think um, that flavor and then that ability to help
Yeah.
simultaneously drove me to this decision.
Yeah. Yeah. So you bought this book in 21, March of
Yeah,
21.
I think
Um,
that's right. Yeah.
Tricky time to buy an agency, right?
Mhm.
There
Sure.
was some pandemic going on at the time or
It's
something
still
like that, where
COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, we were right kind of in the heart of that, maybe on the decline, but still challenging times. How big was the book that you purchased?
It was really small. I think we're talking like 800 and some odd PIF.
Okay.
So it was
That's
pretty.
enough to, that's enough to keep you busy with, service work. You got clients that you've got. What are some things that you learned in that first year? Let's say there's an agent that's thinking of buying a book of 1,000 policies or something like that. What advice would you give them for that first year?
Um, I think it's important to do the things that I didn't do, like reach out to those clients personally. I hired a service person, but I think the cycle that we're in, you've done a phenomenal job of finding sticky people. I have not, right? And so that constant turnover in the service department, I think it's important to have somebody helping with the more mundane, non-revenue generating tasks. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that those new clients need to hear from you that you are there, that you have a direction for the agency. A lot of times, if somebody's selling their agency, I always say this is the world's biggest annuity. If they're selling it, something's wrong. Usually, I hate
Yeah.
to say that, but there's usually some hair on it, and so I think getting ahead of that and having that conversation with every client, whether you send them an intro video or you make a phone call, whatever the case might be, let them know who you are, what it is that you want for them as a client, and how you plan to execute and deliver on that. I did
Yeah.
not do that.
Yeah, there's a difference to starting scratch than purchasing a book, right? When you're starting scratch, you've got one battle to fight, and that's just write new business,
Exactly.
until you get that book, and now you've got service. When you buy a book of business and you have clients, now you've got two main things you have to do. You still have to write business, right? You have to grow, and then secondly, you have to defend. So you got to work to keep what you've bought. At the same time, you have to go out and grow. So there are pros and cons to, there's no wrong way to do it. Like scratch is a good way to go. And so is purchasing because you got cash flow coming in, but you've also brought in maybe a lump of problems, or maybe you brought in definitely a different layer of work because like you said, you've got to reach out to all these people. You got to introduce yourself and you got to make sure that they know they're going to be taken care of, and
All things being equal, I'm a big advocate for scratch.
yeah, I mean, especially there are some companies that are very lucrative. Some of the packages that are available, I know with our company, if you start scratch, you can make a lot of money, if you're good. You can make a lot of money. And but you got to do the work, right? And all you have to do is market and sell,
All you got to
so
do, genuinely.
yeah. So yeah, reaching out to your book of business that you purchased is really important. And yeah, there are different
Personally.
ways to do that. You can call them, you can email them, you could send a video. You should probably do all of those things, right? And so, yeah, you want to get those people in for review, introduce yourself, let them know that you're taking care of. Because a lot of these people, too, depending on what kind of book you bought, you might be the third agent in a short period of time, and they're going to start losing faith in the company. So some people,
I was the third agent, right?
yeah, yeah. So, and now they're like, oh God, who's this guy? Who's this Yahoo? That's my new agent, right?
And something that worked was coming from the district. I'm like, hey, the people that reached out to me, like I said, be proactive, reach out to them. But the people that did call me, they're like, what the hell? I'm like,
Yeah,
hey, I came from the district to create some stability. We realize that this hasn't been an ideal experience for you. That's not what we as an agency want. That's not what farmers wants for their clients. So we're
yeah,
working very hard to create some stability here.
yeah.
And who knows, man? They could pull my appointment agreement after listening to this tomorrow. But for now, we've created 3.5 years of stability. So, we are doing our best to get into whatever you say, you better be willing to work hard enough to back up as well.
Yeah. What was the first year like for you for, onboarding new business? This is one of the toughest things for newer agents to learn because unless you have a massive natural market, which nobody really has, right? Everyone burns through their natural market in like 48 hours, right? The toughest part is trying to bring new business in. And unless you have you're wired with your DNA to be able to do that, it's a skill that's not, loaded in most people. So like what were some things that you did early, to write new business? What were you doing?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. I know you're not a huge fan of internet leads, and from a cost perspective, I'll be honest, I'm not either. But I did run a multi-layered approach where I had enough lead volume coming in for my salespeople while I was out creating centers of influence. So as
Sure.
I was out meeting with realtors and lenders and folks at arm's length with real estate transactions, I needed them working something. So we actually had a really good first year. Now I'm going to caveat that with the cost share program at Farmers was a lot different then. They were eating 50% of my lead acquisition cost, which isn't happening right now. So I think if I was coming into this environment, that would look different. When they're
Hmm.
paying 50% and we're getting pre-negotiated volume pricing, I'm paying like 415 impression. That's not bad, right?
Yeah.
Now $20 all by your lonesome, that's a lot, right?
Hmm.
So it's a little different today than it was then. But we were working through that. We were trying to data mine the book and look for cross-sell opportunities. So that was a big one. One of the things I've been really, really, really negligent on that I would suggest to anyone if you're buying a book is to go through those QNCs, those quotes not closed, and to go through those win backs and establish contact with them early because they might not trust you today. But if you're following up with them every 6 months, where would I be
Right.
now, 3.5 years later, had I started that strategy earlier on? But we had a very good year. I mean, we made topper our first year with a couple of months behind. We started late, so we
Yeah.
we came out of the gates behind. We were able to hit kind of that top 10% tier ranking, and a lot of that was just not being a one-trick pony, not
Hmm.
trying to over extend ourselves, but trying to make sure that we have multiple legs to our marketing strategy. I did some mailers that didn't work very well. I did these postcards that I thought were absolutely gorgeous and been like I would have bought from me, but unfortunately, I'm already my own client. So
Right.
I used some Coal X dates that really didn't do that well. So I'm not a big believer in that. It was the networking and the steady lead flow of um, of the leads that we were buying from trial and error, spending a lot of money trying to find
Yeah.
the good lead vendors. There's
Right.
not a lot of them out there, but there are one or two that are a little better than the others.
What were some what surprised you in your first year?
Probably how difficult it is to recruit and hire and onboard and train and retain. I had a really good team my first year, and they all left like at the very beginning of year two. And um, I'm a big Disney fan. I know people can't see this, but I have like this massive map of original Disneyland in my office here. Like
Yeah, there it is.
massive fan of that. And they talk about like when Walt had this artist strike and he felt like his family like turned on him. And I think as an agency owner, that's the biggest feeling that I could say is when your first team leaves you, it feels like a knife in the heart, right? Like your
Yeah.
children are not only leaving the nest, but they're leaving the nest and telling you that like you're a terrible parent and you suck and they never want to talk to you again. And you're like, wow, that really hurts. That burns. So I think that was probably the hardest thing was I think emotionally people that undertake this endeavor, I think we are kind of emotional people.
Yeah.
Um, because we're here to help. I mean, people that do this usually want to help other people. So that was hard, and like not becoming callous was probably even harder. So I think that's that's a little bit of like the surprise was more the human element of being an employer.
Yeah.
Even as a retirement planner, I was straight commission. I was a practice practitioner, but it was still the firm's employee, not my employee. It's a little different when you become an agency owner.
Yeah. So so what have you learned when it comes to onboarding, finding, interviewing people? I mean, it's a completely imperfect science. And I've been doing this for a while now, and everybody I've ever hired, I was confident that I made the right hire. And I've had 25 people work for me in 20 years, and so I've been wrong more than I've been right. Um, and but I fine-tuned my process over the years to try and be more right, and my last three hires have been really good. What have you learned on that standpoint to try and be better, with finding people that are a good fit, for working with you? Or have you not cracked that code yet?
I don't think I've cracked that code. I always say, it's more about like I have the mentality of, what have I learned not to do again, rather
Okay.
than learning what to do. That's just, I guess, how I'm wired.
Yeah.
And so I found out I'm pretty good at selling insurance, so I'm not in a massive hurry to hire people any longer. Before, when somebody quit, it's like, oh, I gotta refill that position, right? Because I need somebody to be in there selling insurance. And then after hiring people and paying them a base salary and purchasing leads for them and all of the other expenses that go along, I'm like, man, they're making me like 2 grand and I'm paying them like 5 a month. Like this is
Right.
insane, right? And so I'm losing 3,000 a month. So even though I have this mentality, perspective, slant that I need APs to grow my business, they're actually, a lot of them have been, net subtractors. And so I think the one thing I've learned is to just not be in a hurry. I may have swung that pendulum a little too far right now because people are like, "Hey, are you hiring?" I'm like, "Nah, like, come back later."
Right.
Yeah, I'm not I'm not in any massive hurry. I interviewed a dude last week that I really liked, so we'll see if that works out. But
Yeah, it's hard because like when you hire a producer, you're going to take a hit like immediately.
it's an
It's coming,
investment.
it's really coming out of your pocket. If
Hmm.
no one's going to come in and start selling what you need them to sell in the first 90 days at least, and so it's a huge learning curve unless you somehow poach somebody who's doing really well and they just are not in a good fit where they're at right now, and they come in and they're a perfect fit for you, but that might happen once in your life. I don't know, it's not going to happen very often.
I have a good
But
friend
yeah.
who's also an agency owner, and she recently hired somebody who was just knocking it out of the park at another farmer's agency, right? And just like he wanted to be closer to home, and she's like, could this be any better? And
Right.
then the guy comes in and he's selling like 12K, and he's selling 48, 50 at the other place. And I don't think that it's not that he wasn't, it's that he was selling like 30, 60, 25, right? He's selling like statement of liability.
Mm,
She's like, dude, that's not who we are, right? So
yeah.
then when he had to turn on value selling, the guy fell flat on his face because anybody can like take your order for a Big Mac and ask you if you want to supersize it. But if you start getting any trickier than that, like, do you want me to hold the pickles for you? And they're like, oh, geez, I never
Right.
thought about that. And so like when you get into value selling and properly protecting people, I think I think you can find an AP for a dime a dozen. I think finding an AP that actually believes in protecting people and being willing to not be confrontational, but stand their ground educationally
Yeah.
is really difficult.
Yeah, I mean that's something that's a good thought for anybody that's out there in the process of hiring. That's a question that probably should be asked and caught in during the interview process, right? Like, you've been selling, how have you been doing so well? What kind of policies do you sell? What's your theory behind selling? Are you all on price? Do you want to make sure people are covered properly? Like, you got to flush that stuff out in the interview, because if she knew that he was selling state minimums, that'd probably throw up a red flag. Not saying that she wouldn't have given him a shot, but it's a very different sale, right? And like, we're never going to be the cheapest,
I,
you
I
know?
I had an old peer of mine from the retirement planning firm that I just ran into in the hallway in my building. He's like, "Oh, this is where you ended up. I thought you had like, concrete boots on in a lake somewhere." So, he's like, "How's your pricing?" And I go, "Dude, I'm not the low price leader, but my cost per unit of risk is astronomically low. I cover more than everybody else does,
Yeah.
but if you look at my cost per unit of risk, I'm very inexpensive." And he goes, "I like that." But he's
Yeah.
also, target audience, the guys in finance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, today, what is your best method for driving new business? What's the one, like, I'm sure you have different lines in the water, you're getting business from different places, but what is one thing that if you stopped doing it, you'd feel it, where's your best,
my
what's your
my
best system right
two
now?
my I'll say three. My three primaries. We're blessed with non-renewals in Texas right now. So if you don't have the auto, we're not going to renew the home.
Right.
And it is forcing people to go to one side of the fence.
Right.
And the people that are on the side of the fence that we need them to be, risk averse, confident planners, appreciate professional advice, they're staying. They're buying the auto and they're staying. The other people are leaving, and I'm like, good, because they're probably going to hit somebody next week, and I'm going to have to write a big check anyways, right?
Yeah.
So, a lot of people see that as a big detractor, and they're like, oh, I'm like, I'm going to lose my livelihood. I'm like, it just forces you to speed the rate of figuring out who's on your team and who's not. And so
Yeah.
I do think, for as painful of a year as this has been, it is a blessing in disguise, because I think we're finding out who our lifelong clients are,
Hmm.
and who is just here to not buy the cow, but get the milk for free on our home policy, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Um, COIs by far, we're kind of closing up home buying season right now. So I'm a little concerned, but our COI network has been very gracious in introducing us to good people who already trust us based on how our business partners have pre-positioned the relationship.
Hmm.
And then Google, we have over 100 5-star reviews. And so we're up there, man. And people are like, hey, where'd you find us? Like Google. I put best insurance agent near me and you were number one. I'm like, you know
I
why?
know.
Because I am. So how can I help you?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you're kind of cocky. I'm
Yeah.
like, I should be. I'm number one. So the Google has helped a lot.
Yeah.
I can't believe I
That's
called it the Google. Sorry, Google. Google
the
has helped a
Googles,
lot. The
right?
Googles have helped. Yeah.
So let's talk about COIs, right? Centers of influence. What I'm going to assume you're saying, mortgage and real estate are so. How have you built those relationships and how have you maintained them? Because mortgage brokers and real estate agents can be flaky, right? They can kind of come and go. Like you can have a good relationship with a mortgage broker for a while, and then all of a sudden you won't see anything from them for 6 months or something like that,
Sure.
right? Um, how do you how do you start building relationships with mortgage brokers, and then how do you maintain them? Because I mortgage brokers, I think, are the top of the food chain for us when it comes to referrals. It has to They have to have insurance to close a loan. It's a
Can't
formal
close.
part of their process. Like there's a piece of paper they have to have in the damn file for them to do complete their job, right? So they're great for centers of influence, but there are a lot of you out there, right? There are hundreds of agents out there. So how do you meet them? How do you tell them, that you're the guy that's going to take care of their people? And then how do you keep them?
Yeah, great. I'm going to answer with how somebody else does it and then kind of how I've taken that. So we have a president's council agent in our district. His name's Dustin Payne, and he's been really successful at managing that. And I always joke with other agents when I was at the district, like Dustin Payne would walk into a lender's office and he loves to hunt, loves to shoot pigs, stuff like that, right? And so if he sees a big poster on the wall that's like Greenpeace or Peace is the only answer, he's just walking out. They're like, hey, can we help you? He's like, no, I'm in the wrong place, right? But when he walks into the office and he sees a mount, he's like, hey, Bubba, you want to go pig hunting this weekend? The guy's like, yeah, sure. Who the hell are you? He goes, we'll talk about it when we're hunting. Don't worry about it, right? And so there's some organic interest there. And then when he's got the guy on his pig ranch, then he's like, hey, man, I do insurance. Like, who's helping you with insurance? So I think we go in, and this, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth here. I think we go in sometimes a little too hot. Like, hey, how many 1003s do you have on your desk, right? But at the same time, I hope this isn't offensive to your audience, but when I used to talk to new agents, I'd say like when I go into a lender's office, I'm like, hey, I'm here to bang. Like I'm not just trying to take you to dinner. Like I'm here to bang, right? So you have to balance not only what's in it for me, but I'm here to establish a business relationship. And that's I think a critical element because other professionals respect the fact that you're transparent, but that you want to develop a relationship that's mutually beneficial. So I talk a lot about clue reports. We have become so tight as an industry in Texas. If you have more than one water or weather claim in the last 3 years, we will not write you.
Mhm.
So you can get all the way to 3 days before closing, and the lender finally requests the CD or requests the EOI evidence of insurance for the closing disclosure for the CD. And it's like, oh, hey, nobody can insure this risk, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
uh-oh,
Yeah.
now, clients lost their earnest deposit. Everybody's pissed. The realtor's never going to refer to them again. So I talk about like how can I help you not ever get in that position by clue reports. Let me know what your clients are looking at, what they're asking pre-quals for. I'll run the clue, get it back to you. We can make sure that it's an insurable risk, right? That your client can obtain insurance. I do a lot of co-marketing. So the office that I'm in is ridiculously expensive, but I chose it because I have 2 conference rooms, so I can do lunch and learns here. So I
Nice.
let lenders bring in their realtors and then use my space to host events, right? So trying to help them make more money. Most people, they're not going to be mad if you're helping them make more.
Right.
Some of them I know through networking and not groups. Like I don't like the master network BNI stuff. Like that's not my jam. But there's a couple of veteran groups that I'm a part of where there's just like an organic, we already have some commonality. So I think groups like that where there's some sort like if there was a Foo Fighter group in Idaho and you had
I'd
like
be the
3 realtors in
president.
there, dude, you'd be running it, right? Maybe you can even start it when we get off this call. But having that commonality, that common interest, I think helps. But at the end of the day, the short answer is let them know that you're there for business, but not just your business.
Yeah. Man, I love all of that. And I think you're right on the money when it comes to courting COIs. It's a relationship, right? And so like people, I equate it to dating, right? Like I tell the story all the time. There was a glass vendor that came in here 10, 15 years ago. His name's Brian, and he would come in here and he was hilarious. Like we liked the same things. We both liked to go. He'd come in here, he could read the room. If we were busy, he'd jet, but if we had some time, he'd come in and like just entertain us. He was funny, and so he's one of my best friends now, but when he was working for the glass company, he came in regularly. He came in enough, we became friends and he got like all of my glass business. No, he's not there anymore, but that was how that happened. I learned from him, that works,
Sure.
he got all my business, right? So when it comes to mortgage brokers, your guy that's the pig hunter is so smart, to do that and be, let's find something that you're in common with, that you've got something in common with, whether it's a hobby, maybe your families are the same, maybe you got kids that are the same age, maybe you both like whatever. Find something that's not just related to the job that you guys can just kind of, just talk about on the side and go in there and make it casual. On top of that, you have to prove that you're worth it. So like you said earlier, you add value. One of the toughest things about our job in courting mortgage brokers is that we have to show value. And that can be tricky because most people are like, hey, most people lead with price. My pricing is better and I'm going to give good service. Like, well, you better give good service for starters. And like, so that means nothing. That means
Mhm.
nothing to those people. So you got to come in with a fresh take on what you're really going to do differently for them. They need to hear something they haven't heard before, and they need to know that you're going to be a part of their team, and then you got to back it up, so um and
I
it's not
talked to a
hard
lot
to
of,
do. And all this stuff, I'm sorry, one last
no.
thing, all this stuff for building these centers of influence, John, it doesn't cost any money. It costs $0, to do this kind of, I mean, if you want to take them hunting, you want to take them golfing, whatever, cost you $100 or something like that. Is that worth it? Uh-huh.
Oh my God,
But it's
beyond.
not, you don't have to buy a $5,000 system and give these people leads that don't work anyway. Like you don't have to do this stuff. It's just go out and be friendly, and do your job really well, and say what you're going to do and then do what you're going to say. I mean, like that's it. It just takes time. You got to get out of the office, go have some coffee, go have a meal, go do something you guys both enjoy, and and collect mortgage brokers like baseball cards or whatever. Let's How many can you get that are sending you business, because it can change your life.
Oh my God.
If you have 10 mortgage brokers sending you business every month, it can change your life.
10 sending you four, you got 40. You know,
Oh my God.
that's
Yeah.
amazing. You hit 2 points. So one is, I refer to it as differentiating yourself in a sea of sameness. So like, how do you
Yeah. Yeah.
stand out in that market? But like today, I'm doing a 2 o'clock class on overcoming objections for realtors. So they're newer realtors. They're just getting hammered. They're getting pelted. I don't know who's going to win the election. I don't know what's happening with interest rates. I don't know if my home value is going to go up. I don't know if my home value is going to go down. Right. And so, how do we overcome those objections? So they said, "Hey, you're really good at getting punched in the face. Can you help us?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. I've got time on Wednesday. What works for you?" They're like, "2." I'm like, "Let's jump on Zoom. We'll do a class about it." So again, I'm not out buying internet leads for them. I'm teaching them to be more efficient and effective with what they're already doing.
Yeah. So I have not had as much success with realtors and mortgage brokers because that's not a part of their formal process. You have to train your realtors to refer to you, right? And so, how have you had success doing that? How do you get them to make you a part of their process? Because that is not an organic part of what they do. They're doing their thing, they're showing houses. They have to remember to get your name out of their mouth to a client that's going to buy a house. How do you encourage that with
Name,
realtors?
name out of your mouth, and I picture Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, but very traumatic American
Yes.
event. Yeah. Uh, so a lot of it's been accidental, if you will. It's been arm's length. So one of the realtors that I picked up, no one would insure her client, like nobody. And we were able to get it done. And even our rate was a little high. When I say a little, like way freaking high, and I shopped them through the secondary market through Craft Lake, our broker affiliate, and no one wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole there. And I mean, these are like the non-admitted carriers that will insure anybody. And they're like, nope, no thanks. And farmers wanted to do it. And they're like, that's a little high. And I was like, well, it's kind of that or homelessness. Which would you prefer? And they're like, okay, let's do it. I'm like, cool. And so now this realtor's like, hey, you saved my bacon. You're my new best friend.
Yeah.
And so there's been a lot of that. And then presenting, so co-sponsoring some events with title companies to present and stand in. It's like, to your point, it's $100. I pitch in on the lunch and I get
Yeah.
10 minutes of FaceTime. I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. And really hammering that clue report, as generic as it sounds. I'm like, what, regardless of the side of the transaction that you're on, right? Because if you're the listing agent and your client forgets to list that they had a claim, how much is that going to torpedo your deal? And they're like, it's going to absolutely put it in the grave. I go, exactly. Right. And then, or if the home's uninsurable and they just can't sell it, like literally nobody can get financing to buy the damn home. Like, I want to buy your home. I can't. The bank won't give me the money because I can't insure it.
Yeah.
And then if you're out writing multiple offers, wouldn't you rather know whether or not that offer is worthwhile and that the home can be financed because it can get insurance? Or would you rather just put in 600 offers and then every one of them, because we're in North Texas, had some kind of claim for a burst pipe and a hail claim? So that's two in the last 3 years and it's ineligible for underwriting. And they're like, yes, I want that. So it's about making them more efficient. It's about making them more educated. It's about providing them with more intelligence data.
So they're a part, you're a part of their due diligence, really, is what's happening, right? So
It's a
they will,
part of their
you will
process, right?
tell them, at some point, you're like, hey, we got a claim here. It's a problem, or something like that. Or you can be like, you know what, we're in the clear here. We're going to
Looks
go. So, I
great.
mean, that's great because you're definitely giving them some value just by clearing that up. Cause yeah, you're right. Some of that stuff is hidden. Some of that stuff's not disclosed, and that sucks. But if you can uncover that earlier, then you're not up, up against the gun when it comes to, when you're staring down closing and you're frantic with trying to find something because all of a sudden you found one or two claims and you're like, this whole thing could fall apart. So you could, yeah. So that's being part of their due diligence is really smart.
And we're not
So
the
how,
only one. Somebody told me the other day Allstate won't insure with any right now. And I don't know whether that's true or not, but that was someone who we onboarded last month. He's like, I'm an Allstate client and they won't insure my new home because I had a claim on my old home.
yeah,
I'm like, well, there's double jeopardy when it comes to home claims. And we went through the whole thing and I won the business because I was the last
yeah,
man standing.
yeah. I'm doing something next month. I reached out to a company that I don't even have any insurance with. And this is a marketing company, small marketing company in town, but I interviewed her on my podcast and I'm just staying in her orbit, like they run a really good business. I like her. I like her team. I've been in her office a few times and I was like, hey, how about she's got like 6 or 7 people on in her office. It's not big, but they're all younger, they're all probably in their 20s. Like they're getting married, like they're they'd be good clients for me,
They're living
right? Like
life. Yeah, they're
they're
getting
gonna
life
need life
started.
insurance, stuff like that. So I said, hey, Shonda, how about I see what you're doing out there. I really like what you're doing. Would you allow me to bring you guys lunch? And I can, and I said, full disclosure, I'm like, I'm going to bring up some insurance. We're going to talk a little insurance, right? So I said, and we can do it any number of ways. Like you guys can, ask a handful of questions. I could talk some FAQs, just give some good advice on what it's like to be, what you should look for if you're a first time homeowner, or what you should look for in auto insurance, or just, how to figure out how much life insurance you need or something like that. And we'll keep it really light, keep it really casual. Maybe open it up for some questions or something like that. And we'll, have some sushi and just talk shop or something like that, but really casual. And she was all over it. She's like, absolutely, come on down. And I booked it. We're going to go on September 12th or something like that. I'm going to build some relationships, hopefully uncover some business. And what a fun way to spend a couple of hours, right? I mean, I think, and this is a marketing company, like I'm just, if you insure any businesses, and I don't even insure them yet, but hopefully this will lead to something like that. But yeah, if you insure businesses that have employees, it's a great way, to thank them, for choosing to insure with you. Go in there, feed them some pizza or whatever, just be casual, talk a little bit of shop. And then before you leave, is there anything I can do for any of you guys, or something like that? And then try and, you know, let your charisma do what it needs to do to earn some business, right? So,
The
yeah,
interesting thing about insurance when I'm doing an intake, right, I go through the old forks. I'm like, hey, tell me about your family, and then what do you do for a living, and what do you do for fun when you're not doing
yeah,
that? And then I go through as I'm putting this proposal together for you, what concerns do you have about your insurance? And like almost without fail, it's I don't know, like I don't
yeah,
even know how to answer that question. I'm like, well, a lot of people are concerned about their roof. A lot of people are concerned about water damage. And I kind of go through some of the things and I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm concerned about all of those. And when you do this for a living, you forget that like this is such an abstract concept. I tell people all the time, look, man, you buy whatever is cheapest because it's like you put it under your pillow and you pray to God that the insurance fairy doesn't come to collect. But at some point in time, he does, and you need to have the right coverages when that time comes. And they're like, oh, I never thought about that because some stupid lizard told them it doesn't matter, but it does.
right, yeah. All right. So you wrote a lot of business last month, right? You had a good month, right? Your
Had a
best
decent
month?
one. Best month ever.
Yeah. And what's your team look like today?
So I've got my wife is running the service side of things. I snatched out 18 years of teaching to create stability, and then we
Mm-hmm.
hired Jill. Jill is what I would consider like our straight service person. She has 18 years of experience, so she's not inexperienced, but she's from Michigan, so she's not Texas experienced and definitely not farmers experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So she's still kind of learning the ropes, and then myself as I guess chief fry cook, as they say over at Cane's, right? I'm the head fry cook over here.
Yeah. So there's three of you there, and there's one of you, that's primarily marketing and bringing in new business. Now you've got your other two that you've trained well, it sounds like, to look for opportunities and to cross sell, right?
Sure.
But you wrote over 100,000 in premium.
We did.
How did you do that last folio? That's a lot, man. First of all, congratulations. That's a big number. I just want people to know that like it's possible. Like that's a big number for a three-person agency and with one primary salesperson. So kudos to you. You know, how did you do it? Did you have a number that you were chasing? Are you someone that's so goal oriented that you're just going to hit whatever number you put in front of you? Like walk me through your sales mentality, and how you're achieving these numbers because it's really impressive.
Thanks. So I had a couple of months ago two salespeople, and I should say I had two people in sales roles. Let me
Right.
reverse that, right? I had two people in sales roles, and the month that I had both of them, I think we did like 68,000 in premium, but that was service, them, and me, right? So that's kind of like
Yeah.
four people with their hands in the pot of selling. And so my goal was to just show that we could sell the same amount of insurance without salespeople. Like that was my goal. I'm like, hey man, if I do 68K and I'm not paying base salaries and marketing expenses, then that's a win. Like that it was just a personal confidence booster, I guess. It's like
Yeah.
going up to somebody at the bar and saying like I'd never really date that person, but if I can just get their phone number, I can go home tonight and be like, hey, I still got it, right? So like
Yeah.
it was just that I want to know that we can hit that number. So we hit that, and then we were still running with like 10 days left in the folio, and I'm like, hey man, I wonder if we could do match our best month ever, which I think was like 84. And so I'm like, yeah, we hit that. I'm like, oh my God, how far can this thing go? And it's important to know too, Katie was gone for 2 weeks last month, 1 week of the prior folio sales month, and then 1 week of this one because she was out at the Philmont Scout Ranch in the woods backpacking with our oldest kid. So it's really just Jill and I, and Jill was just like grew multiple hands and was just, taking the phones, doing intake sheets. We still use like old school intake sheets, even though we have
Yeah.
agents and everything else, but I still love paper because a guy named Brett Vance beat paper into me. And so, she's doing the intake forms, and then I'm going through the sales process with them, right? And I think there's there's a couple of things. I did one where it's like a $10,000 household, and I'm like, there's no way in hell this guy's buying this. No way this guy's buying this policy. But you know what? Going to present anyways. And we
That's right.
present via video, which I think is what you're stabbing at, right? So we send people proposal videos where we show them the proposal up on the screen, the VIP and the side-by-side home, and we explain it, simply explaining insurance plug right there. We just explain what it is and what it does when they need it to work. And then we send them that video and I go, hey, any questions, any adjustments, or if you're ready to get this started, let me know. And then I primarily just shoot people text. I'm like, hey, I sent you via video, let me know that you got it, please. And then we follow up with them. But sent him the video, and he was an adjuster. So I'll be honest, like I was a little scared, even though I think
Yeah.
I do a good job. This guy does this for a living. Like he interprets insurance policies for a living. And so I get on the phone with him, and he's got me up against the ropes, right? He's like, all right, so metal marring, you have that on there? I'm like, I do. It's soft metals on your roof, blah, blah, blah. We go over limited water. He's like, I like that. He's like, what about sewer and drain? I'm like, well, we provide coverage for backup that originates on the premises, but if it's off premises, then you would need the endorsement. He goes, I'm good with just on premises. So it's on there. I'm like, yeah, it's on there. And it was great. Let's do it. I'm like, what? Like, I'm not like, hey, give me your check. I was like,
I
I'm
know.
sorry, excuse me. And,
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, we're ready. So I go, great. I just need that routing and account number for the checking account, and I'll send the bill invoice over to your lender. And when we're all done, I go, hey, out of curiosity, who else were you looking at? And he's like, well, I'm with Limu right now. And I went to them, and they were $3,000 more than you are. And they didn't have any of the limited water. They didn't have the metal marring. So I think like we're in such a chaotic environment right now that like we look at these premiums and we're just shocked by our conscience of how much they are. And we have this habit of disqualifying our prospect before they disqualify themselves.
Yep.
And if we just followed a sales process consistently, you'd find that we're really not all that uncompetitive. And even at times when we are, I've had people that are like, hey man, you're quite a bit more, but man, I really feel like you know what you're doing and I want to sleep at night. So let's go ahead and do it. Like, let's go with you.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that just professional presentation that helps win business. And when people understand what they're buying and how it's going to perform at claims time, they're
Yeah.
more likely to pay for it. If we're just like, hey, here's your premium, and they're like,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm not paying that. But when you're like,
Yeah.
hey,
You
here's the
can't.
coverage and this is what it costs, it's a different conversation.
Yeah. You can't be emailing proposals and,
No.
and spray and pray. You have to, someone said it to me a while ago, and they're like, don't send an email to do the job that a salesperson should do. Right. And so, like, if you're sending out emails with proposals, like, that's not your job. That's something that you're asking them to interpret what's on that page, which is impossible because we speak a different language than a general public when it comes to insurance. You have to walk them through what that means. You have to walk them through why that's important to them, why they need it, why they don't need it. If you could help them be involved with the crafting of this policy, they're more invested. They feel like it's really been personalized for them, like you did with that adjuster. It's so smart. You can't, and I love the video emails and stuff like that. That's the next best thing to being in front of somebody face to face. It's because it's personal. You're doing the sale. They're just not present with you, but they appreciate it. You're valuing their time, which is why I like that as well. And then you hop on a phone call and you fill in any holes that you might have missed or answer any questions that they might have. And you're right. When it comes to pricing, that's one of the first things that I have to coach my producers away from, is that when they throw a price, I can hear sometimes in my office a quote when it comes through. I can just hear him go, fuck. Like I can hear him just be, and I'm like, no, no, no. I'm like, you have no idea if that's good or not. You have no idea if it's good or not, unless you know what they're paying. And sometimes we don't know, or maybe they're shopping a new house or something like that. We have no idea what's good anymore and what's not. You had a $10,000 policy show up and you did that, and you were like, oh man, but y- y- we don't know. We don't know if that's right or not. So
You got
yeah,
one
you
of
got,
your Sorry, I stepped on you. You got one of your, and I don't know like what episode it is, but I think it was, agency launch. And you talked about like whenever your people get frustrated, you're like, sell it. And so
sell it.
like we
Yeah.
started, yeah, so we started doing that here. And it's just, hey, sell it, right? Like that's the job. But one extra kind of add on there, one of the people that we onboarded last month is a benefits advisor for a corporation, right? Like this guy buys insurance for a living for health and life and prepackaged benefit products. And I made them a video, and the same thing. I'm like, hey, watch it at leisure, grab some popcorn, turn off Netflix tonight, turn on John Powell, enjoy the show, right? I get super boring with it. Like I really do. Like I get into explaining, hey, what are settlement options, right? This is the number at the top. We'll pay up to this, but how do we pay that, right? And so
Yeah.
he's like, man, we watched your video like 5 times. And he goes, I buy insurance for a living. And he's like, I learned so much watching that. And I don't think that we were competitive on price on that one. And the dude's like, yeah, I called, and there's more to it. Like I called, it's a new build. So I called the community. I'm like, hey, can you send me the floor plan and can you send me the upgrades? And I let him know that I did that. You have to let people know what
Yeah,
you're doing on their behalf, right?
totally.
So when I start the video, whether it's realtor.com or whether it's Google Street View, I'm like, here's your home, because it anchors them psychologically to, you're not buying a piece of paper, you're buying your home back, right?
Right.
And this is your home. And then I go through photos and I'm like, we accounted for your granite countertops. We accounted for that beautiful walk-in shower that you've got there. And people are like, oh shit, this guy did so much to make sure that we were
Yes.
properly protected, and tailoring it, like you said, to them. Now
I
it's
think,
just, do you value what I do for a living, or are you cheap? Which are
yeah,
you?
I think a good goal to have for any agent out there is to try and get your prospect to say these words. I never knew that before.
No one's
Or
ever talked to me about
no
insurance
one's
like
ever
that
told me
before.
that before. No one's ever taught me that before. Like you should try if you can get those words to come out of a prospect's mouth, your closing ratio just leapt, to whatever number it's going to be. But I love hearing those words because it just means that you've immediately built trust. Just it does not take a lot to build trust. It doesn't at all. You can build trust with someone in 5 minutes. You can make them laugh. You can teach them something new. Like they will trust you. Okay. Now, you could break trust just as easily by not doing what you're telling them to do, but building trust can be easy. And doing the little things that you're doing builds trust really quickly because they know that you are working for them when you do that kind of stuff. It's not just banging out, a proposal based on, what the 360 says. You're like, well, here's what it says, like,
What do you mean you
no.
don't have 3 utility rooms?
Yeah. I mean, and
And
it
that's,
does, how much effort does that take, John? 5 minutes,
it doesn't.
eight
I mean, I
minutes.
blow through quoting, and I really do, because once you develop that muscle memory, you can go through pretty quickly. But that's it, right? I mean, that to me, that's the job. Is I tell folks when they start complaining about rate, I go, look, my job is to make sure that you have the right coverage, and then to get it as inexpensive as humanly possible, and then keep you as a client forever. And I tell people, I'm like, dude, I make like 9% on auto, I make 10 on home. Your home policy, yeah, it's $4,000 a year. It's not inexpensive, but of that, I'm making like $30 a month. That doesn't even pay my phone bill. Like, trust me, I'm not trying to gouge you. I'm trying to get you taken care of properly, and then I'm trying to make you my client until the day one of us dies,
Right.
because that's the only way I make money. I only make money if you stay.
Yep. All right. Last question for you, John. How do you learn, to get better at what you're doing? Like you did not start this job fully loaded with how to run an insurance agency. How have you learned to do what you do, and how will you continue to learn to get better?
Yeah, so a lot of people say I'm a Dietz fanboy that I know, and I guess there's probably some truth to that, because not to be ingratiating to you, but when I decided to leave the district, my job at the district was business. Like, hey, here's the initiatives that Farmers has. Here's how you can maximize your income. Here's where you're currently at, according to the goals that you shared with me.
Right.
And that was my job. I didn't quote, I didn't present, I didn't do any of that stuff. And when I found out that I was going to purchase an agency, I was like, oh man, I don't know the first thing about selling insurance. And so I downloaded Agency Launch, and I downloaded Simply Explaining Insurance, and I listened to it like 4 a day. I listened to two on the way to the district office, two home, and I
Ugh,
consumed it. And I mean,
that's a
I just,
lot. That's a lot of me.
it's a lot of deets. Yeah. And I mean, I just consumed it. And, I worked on, how can I make insurance accessible to people to where they understand what they're buying? Because ultimately, I tell people I have 3 jobs. My job is to help you understand what you're buying, why you're buying it, and how you can expect it to perform at claims time. If I've done those 3 things, I've done my job. Do I want you to be a client? Yes. But if you don't become my client, but you understand those 3 things, I've still done my job. Right. And so I think the getting better, I tell folks that will listen, don't ever stop consuming information, right? Don't ever stop understanding what's going on at the industry at large. Don't stop understanding what's going on with your carrier. Don't stop understanding what's important to your consumers, because I think those are the things that will differentiate you. I think those are the things that will make you successful, because if I was thinking about this call today, Einstein had that whole, like, if you can't explain it to a 4-year-old, you don't know what you're talking about. And I
Hmm.
think we get so wordy and we get so like, I have a license and these are technical terms that I learned during the licensing exam. And people are like, nobody gives a shit, right?
Right.
Like, how is that going to help me when I have a client who pulled out to look around a corner to be safe, but they pulled out too far and an F-150 hit them, flipped. All three occupants went to the ER. One of them still in physical therapy a year later, right?
Hmm.
We have a client who hit a pedestrian who wasn't in a crosswalk, and it wasn't criminal negligence. It was just a bad situation, but he still got sued.
Yep.
Those are the things that we talk to people about. Like, do you need an umbrella? Yes. Like,
Hmm.
yes, 100%. Yes. And do you need life insurance? I say, I don't know. There's two things that are certain in life, right? Death and taxes. And if you have a permanent life insurance policy, it solves for both of those.
Hey.
You get to pass the money tax free and when you die, right? So, like,
Yeah.
it solves for the two things that we know are going to happen. And when you put things in that manner, people are like, oh, that makes sense. And
Yeah.
so I think it's just never stop consuming data, be an interpreter, be empathetic, actually give a shit about people. It's
Yeah.
that easy.
Yeah. All right, buddy. Hey man, you're killing it out there. I'm really proud of you. You're doing really good work with a skeleton crew and like you're learning to do things that will help you the rest of your career. Like that's one thing that was really important to me is when I started my agency, I was broke as hell and we didn't have bonuses that new agents have now. So we had to sell a lot of insurance just to pay the bills and I didn't have a budget for marketing. But I learned how to do it and it was the greatest gift that I had because I still don't have a marketing budget and we still write a lot of business because I learned how to do it by like blunt force, you know what I mean? And that's what you're doing. You learn how to write $100,000 pretty much alone, so like you've got that muscle now and like you can do what you want with that. You can ride that wave for a while. Yeah, you've learned what it's going to be like to onboard new people and what that might be to hold them accountable and look for the right people. And yeah, you really sky's the limit for you. So you're doing a heck of a job. Congratulations on your success. Thanks for sharing your stories with us, man. They're really invaluable, and I hope that people listen and deploy some of the stuff that you're doing because it works.
Thanks. Can I
Cool.
give you one final thought?
Yeah, yeah.
We had a nice little old lady client of ours refer her neighbor and her son to us. And my wife was like, all right, so, are we sending her a $5 gift card? I'm like, shit. I was like, I just listened to this Dietz episode and I sent it over to her. And so she's like, 25. I'm like, 25 for her favorite restaurant. So, we sent her two $25 gift cards for, her favorite restaurant where she lives. And, that's our next strategy is how do we bring our clients into being our business partners. And so keep up the good work to you, being that thought leader in the industry and bringing new ideas to building businesses because
Yeah.
people are listening.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. All right,
Yeah.
buddy. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
All right. And stop.